discussion tonight, which is the town administrator is going to give us an update regarding the October 28th social media issue that we had. This is specifically around the issue of some notes that were inadvertently posted to the town website reflecting some activity in an executive session. And so we want to address that. We understand that it's problematic that those notes got posted. We want to make sure that we address it properly and expeditiously, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I do want to ask that, because I know there are a lot of people in the room who have a lot of points of view on this, and there's probably a lot of emotion as well. We are not going to take public comment on this. This is a discussion between the board. I'm going to ask you to respect that and allow the board to conduct its business. So, Jim, if I could ask you to step through it.
I'd like to take this opportunity to provide the board with an update regarding the October 28th social media post, which was circulated by a private resident of the community. First off, I'd like to start off by saying the Board of Selectmen's executive session meeting notes from August 6, 2019 were inadvertently posted on the town's website on September 19th. These notes were not approved by the Board of Selectmen and have since been removed from the website. There has been much speculation about the information contained in those personal notes. I would urge caution to anyone who may want to take those notes at their face value, because they do not contain accurate information of the discussion that took place. I understand that the board members like you want to ensure that there's transparency in our government and that information is provided in an efficient and effective manner. The law, however, provides for specific purposes which the board may engage in executive session, and the contents of this meeting were not ready to be made public at the time of their release. A mistake was made, and since this incident, we have put in safeguards to ensure that it does not happen again. Going forward, minutes of materials posted on the Selectmen's website will be reviewed by myself and the Assistant Town Administrator, and then we will authorize the staff to post those minutes. The board will be provided with an actual draft of the minutes by the end of this week for your review and consideration.
Great, thanks, Jim. Before
We're getting them tonight. You told me Friday we were getting them tonight.
No, I did not say that.
Okay, so are they going to be on the meeting in 2 weeks?
Before we
Are they going to
begin,
be on the meeting? You also said on the phone call
Before
that
we-
in 2 weeks it'll be on the meeting. Is that your intention?
before we
Is that your
begin,
intention?
David, calm down.
before we begin discussion, David, I do want to just remind the board that, and we all do this, we have to take ethics training. The state requires it of all Board of Selectmen members, and we've all done this. And part of that is to talk about behavior in executive session and the confidentiality of discussion in executive session, which is critically important. And the reason I'm raising it is because as we discuss things amongst us tonight, I want to just remind the board, as we talk to ourselves, that we are in a public forum and that we are bound by the executive session confidentiality rules. And David, you know this well. So specifically, Board of Selectmen guide from the State Ethics Commission, confidential information, section 23. The law prohibits you from publicly revealing confidential information or from using it for private or political purposes. Anything that is not a public record under the Massachusetts Public Records Law is considered confidential. Remember that matters discussed while the board is in executive session are confidential until after the executive session minutes are released as public records. And if anyone would like further additional information on the public records law, the website is www.sec.ma.us/pre/IDXHEM. And I'll give that to anybody who would like it. I know you didn't get that as I said it. The point of saying that is that the board is bound by the confidentiality of that executive session, and we need to respect that. So as we're having conversation here tonight, I do want to just remind all of the members that we are bound by that. We will continue to be bound by that until we as a board meet and review those minutes and then release them if that's what we choose to do as a board. Right now, we don't have minutes. People have asked me, why don't you put the minutes on the agenda? Well, we don't have minutes, is the honest answer. Jim just said that we would have a draft of those minutes by the end of the week. My commitment to you is that we will expeditiously move to review and vet those minutes properly. We will follow good process. We don't want part of the reason we're even having this conversation is because our process was broken. We don't want to compound that issue. A lot of this has to do with liability to the town, and therefore the confidentiality statement that I'm making. And so it's very, very important that we respect that we run a good process, but that we be transparent and that we provide clear and accurate accounting for what we need to be held accountable for. So I'm not suggesting that we aren't going to release minutes. That's not the point. What I'm saying is we're going to follow a good process, and we're not going to compound this problem. So with that, I'll open it to discussion with the board. Who'd like to go first?
I would.
David?
What information is now available as a public record?
None.
I asked you previously in an email to have council opine on that issue as to what was public record and what was not. I reminded you on Friday that I still had not had an answer.
Yep.
And you're saying that council has opined on that, or is that your opinion?
I have not said that. I've said that what is public record is that we posted an executive session, and we had that executive session. I think that's the extent of what's in the public domain.
And you're not going to make any statement as to what has occurred to this point?
I am not. I'm
You're not even going to make a statement as to what the current the police department chain of command is?
David, let me remind you again of the confidentiality rule here.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, Mr. O'Neill, you may shut me down, but you're not going to shut me up. This is something of such importance to this town, the activities of this board. You know, if I could sit further away, I would. This is tremendously upsetting. And I do want to just make one statement. As you know, the meeting notes were inadvertently released, and our board has received questions about it from our residents. I know there's a natural curiosity to try and find out what's going on. I get it. But what I don't get, and I find actually deplorable, is that people speculating about the event and making up entire incorrect narratives, even to the important point of who the victim is. That is something I find completely egregious. And spreading rumors that possibly a victim had been paid off. This needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. I realize that the lack of transparency from this board has allowed this vacuum of information to occur, and that people are concerned. I was promised by Mr. O'Neill when he requested my request to have the minutes on tonight's meeting on Friday, that these minutes would be on the meeting in 2 weeks. He said, we don't have time to review them. Well, we had the entire weekend, we had Friday, we had Monday, and we had today. This is a furtherance of their cover-up of the facts of this matter. This is a continuing of their cover-up of this entire matter. People should know what's going on. People should know what the command staff of their police department looks like at this point.
David, I'm going to remind you again of the Board of Selectmen guide for the State Ethics Commission regarding confidentiality.
Again, this board and I are so far apart on this issue. Thank you.
Other comments from the members of the board?
I would just say that, you know, I take the confidentiality of our executive session very seriously. And I know there's information out there. And I'm just wondering who has been talking about our executive session discussions to other people.
Are you accusing me?
I'm not accusing you, I'm just wondering who did that.
Well,
So
I'll tell
have
you
you
what.
talked to other people? about-
Absolutely, and I will continue to talk to other people. And if you want to shut me down here, you can continue to
David,
shut
I would
me down.
recommend, if you have been violating the confidentiality segment of the State Ethics Commission rule, that you stop
You can
talking.
continue to protect your political allies and your political cronies. And
That's not what this is about, Dave.
It is absolutely what this is about. These records should have been released as soon as the document, you came before this board, Mr. O'Neill.
You're incorrect.
You came here and said the exception that you were going to use was under the employment contract exception of the public records law. That section says that when the contract, the reason for having that exception is that you don't want that negotiation process to be available to the person on the other side of that contract. Obviously, if you're talking about salary of somebody, you don't want them to look at the minutes of the meeting and then decide, well, I'm going to wait until they get to that number. I'll give you an example. So if we were hiring a finance director, and it was, we were offering them money, and we said, offer the first offer $100,000. If they don't take that, add another week's vacation, but you have authority to $110,000. So obviously, you don't want that record out there. But once that contract is signed, the reason for the confidentiality no longer exists. Labor Council and this board decided to use that section of the code, of the exceptions, to use that exception, they decided to use that exception to go into executive session. They now live by it. There was a better section of the executive session that should have been used, and I argued it that day, and it got cut off from the video feed, amazingly. And this was in the open session of the meeting, and that says when you're disciplining an employee, it's an entire process that must be followed. And maybe if they had called in under that section, that privacy could be held to be. But they purposely did it that way, and they're stuck with that. This is a continuing process of protecting a political ally.
David,
honestly,
you're so wrong.
I know.
I can tell you're very agitated, but you're just spinning yourself out of control, talking about things you shouldn't be talking about, and you've admitted on TV that you violated the trust of executive session, and that has implications. I'm going to suggest we stop right here and don't continue down this path. Don't make it worse than it already is for you.
And I think that's probably prudent, because I don't really know, knowing now that David has spoken outside of executive session.
I spoke to people after November 1st.
It's hard to know.
After November 1st.
It's hard to
And
know.
the reason for the agreement had expired. After November 1st.
I think you are incorrect, sir.
It's hard to know what may or may not have been said. So I think
I'm
it's.
happy to have that argument in court.
Yeah, okay. So I think what we need to do is stop further discussion, because we really don't know what's been said. I think we need to find out and make sure that we're not going to expose the town to further liability. What I would say is this: Jim is going to produce minutes, or Jim and Cindy, by the end of the week. We will take those minutes under advisement. We will take a look at them. We will vet them. We will have town council vet them. And when they are ready for release, we will release them. And again, I will remind the board that the law
You're
says.
reminding me. That's okay. I heard it. You don't have to remind us.
I'm going to do it again. Remember that matters discussed while the board is in executive session are confidential until after the executive session minutes are released as public records. So that's the process we're going to follow.
And they're going to delay releasing the minutes for another 30 days.
Yeah, Ben. Sure.
Jump in as well.
Yeah.
So to say my piece in the middle of this, I think, I agree very much with David that the speculation that's gone on online and by, certain people is deplorable and beyond the pale. And I really don't have the words to describe it, and I've spoken with David about that, and we're in very close agreement. Similarly, in having spoken with David and other members of this board, along with people who are in the audience tonight, I find the speculation of cover-ups and other things of that nature to be equally deplorable. It's speculation and spreading of rumors, just like anything else. Speaking only for myself, I can say that I've talked with people about this to the extent that I can under the law with the executive session. Residents have reached out to me and said, what's going on? We have questions. This seems unreasonable. And all of that is very fair, obviously, given the situation. But I think that if we can all take the temperature down for a minute and understand that the executive session meeting minutes are going to be released in due course in the proper framework of things. There's a way to do this. There's a procedure, and we're going to follow it. And they're going to be released to the public just as they should be. And I understand that people don't think it's fast enough. It's not fast enough for me either. I empathize completely with that. But I do agree with Jim in that mistakes have been made already on this. And so moving more quickly or rushing things is only going to compound the issue. So I would only ask for patience and lowering of the temperature from a lot of folks so that we can get this right and get the information out there. And I would just say again that I'm available via email or phone or dare I say Facebook to give what information I can to people. And like I say, there's a lot of people in the room here that have reached out and asked questions, and I'll certainly speak to what I can. And then after the minutes are released, to the extent that we can speak further, we're open to that. So I think people jumping out there with the speculation is awful. And I'll just say again that I'm available. And I know that I'm only speaking for myself, but I know a lot of the other members of the board as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, and it's well said, so thank you, Ben. Any further discussion? Nope. Okay, then let's move on to our next order of business. We've got Jack Wiley in here to talk to us about using $10,000 from the Wetlands Protection Act fees for staff hours, as we did in years past. So, Jack. Good evening.